What's coming up next is a creative stewardship panel. And we have 3 individuals that are going to be talking to you. As a reminder, there's going to be opportunities on the screens for you to answer questions posed by our group, as well as having the opportunity, when you're not doing that, to ask questions, just as we have been doing all day. This panel discussion is, again, about creative stewardship, and the 3 panelists are Ms. Sue Steege, who is the Director of Transformation Ministries at First Trinity Lutheran in Tonawanda, New York, a city I know well. Also, Pastor Frank Italiano from Trinity Lutheran in Crete, Illinois, and Lorig, who is the consultant at Faith Unleashed Consulting and also a member at Trinity in Crete. And I've had the privilege of working with both of them over the years in a consulting capacity, and it's been a privilege to know them as well. This panel discussion is going to explore what happened at Trinity Lutheran in Crete, a church that took them from a very low percentage of members in ministry to almost everyone using their gifts to serve the Lord. They're going to articulate what can be learned from their experience and how it can translate into any ministry setting. They'll also explore mindset shifts that are necessary, as well as practical steps to take. Please join me in welcoming Sue, Frank, and Lori.
There we go.
Here we go. Ready, set?
Ready, set, go.
Okay, let's do this, people.
Well, it's just such an honor to be here. My name is Sue Steege, and I'm going to be facilitating a conversation between Frank and Lori, and I did not know them before we got ready to do this together, and I can assure you, you are in for a treat. 2 lovely servants of the Lord that have a lot to teach us about how to help people use their gifts in ministry. I just want to give you an idea of kind of the structure of how we're going to go about this today. There are going to be a couple times where we're going to invite you to share with another person, and it would really be great if you would also participate in the Mentimeter questions, because what happens when you do that is we get a feel for the whole room and not just the 3 of us up here, and we would love to have your full participation in that. There is a handout in your folder, and the handout is just some takeaways that we thought might be helpful for you. We're not addressing those things specifically, but if you saw something in the handout that you wanted to hear more about, you could certainly use that in the Q&A time to pose a question. Also, our contact information is there, so we talked about this a lot. We really want to be helpful to you, and so if we could be helpful to you sometime after this conference is over, our contact information is there. One other thing I want to mention is that all 3 of us are from congregations of a similar size, worshiping somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 a weekend, and we know that our congregations of all sizes are represented in this room. And so I just want to encourage you to be watching for concepts and principles that hold no matter how big or small your setting is. So, to get started, we're going to go right off the bat here, and I'm going to ask that you share with 1 or 2 other people, talk about a time when you were really energized about serving in some setting. You served someplace, and it was a great experience. Tell somebody about that, just for a minute or 2. So now is one of those times where we'd like to get an idea about what your experience was like. And so using the Mentimeter, I'm going to ask you to choose one of these 4 items. They could have all been true, but I'm going to ask you to pick one. What was that experience because it was a great fit for your gifts, because the people were fun, because I had a good time, because I had good training for the experience, or my serving made a difference someplace? What was the most important factor of your experience?
Cool. awkward one.
Lori, I'm about to ask you what you think of that. All right. So, very interesting. Lori, I'm wondering what you make of those numbers.
Well, I think it just really speaks to the idea that everybody wants to make a kingdom impact, right? That's what it comes down to. Somebody else has been blessed by the serving experience that you had. So, great to see. Great to
Yeah,
see.
what intrigues me is that 0% was because they had good training. So does that mean we don't train? What does that mean exactly? I think I might know.
I think so. I think it's that we don't train.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that. But I would just say fun is often a good perk, right, when you serve. How many of you guys like to have a good time?
Yeah.
Anybody? Yeah. Woo! Come on, let's hear you. This is the after lunch crowd. I want to make sure everybody's awake. Okay.
All right. Well, let's just talk briefly about why this matters. And as we do that, we're going to look at Ephesians 2, verses 8 to 10. Would you read this with me? For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and
This is not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast.
For
For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works,
which
God prepared in advance for us to do.
Our experience, my experience as a lifelong Lutheran, is that Ephesians 2, 8, and 9 are just our favorite passages. And they are so powerful, right? But sometimes we stop there and we don't go on to remember that we are saved by grace through faith for a reason. And that reason involves us being God's very handiwork. And it's not just us in this room, right? It's every believer in your pews. This verse is for them. And so the why of helping people get connected to their own ministry is so that they can live into the handiwork that God has already made them to be. And so we also know that there are great shortages. I am sure all of us, especially in this day and age when people are attending less often to worship, it seems harder and harder to find people to fill the holes that we have. And yet, filling holes is not the ultimate purpose, right? Equipping people to be who God created them to be in this world, to serve His kingdom in the world, is what it's all about. Sometimes our own standards get in our way, and we have kind of a fun video that's going to show you that.
Before you start, watch the name tags, okay? And you can laugh at this, because it's kind of funny. All right? Let's go.
All right, next up, King David.
Thanks for coming, King David. What qualifies you to be our next small group leader?
Well, what was that word you used before my name?
King?
Yeah, king, right. How many of those am I up against?
My strengths, plagues. I'm pretty good with the staff.
Can't decide who gets the last brownie? Cut it in two. Boom. Wisdom.
Parting large bodies of water. Desert survival skills.
Weaknesses. Weaknesses.
Mountain climbing. Commandment retrieval.
Does that look weak to you?
And I can make a pretty mean goat sausage.
Okay, I mean, maybe haircuts. Women. Whose isn't?
So I lied. I said my wife was my sister. They were gonna kill me. Why are we even getting into this?
I'm just not sure we're comfortable with you in a leadership position.
Look,
Jesus Christ himself called you Satan.
he was trying to make a point.
Get thee behind me, Satan, I believe is the exact quote.
Bathsheba. I knew you were gonna go there.
It was a rock to the back of the head. I really regret that it happened.
And that's when you slept with the maid?
My wife said she was fine with it.
Abraham,
What?
come on.
Okay, timeline. First, I slept with his wife.
No. I didn't kill Christians.
Then I lied to him.
I was just watching people's coats.
Then I had him killed, okay?
They killed Christians.
It's a long time ago.
Besides, that was a different guy. That was Saul.
Have I ever killed anyone? Why? You got somebody giving you beef? Huh? You need something taken care of? Where's the app? Yo, bring it, huh?
Didn't you deny Christ 3 times?
No.
Nah, I'm pretty sure you did.
No.
Yeah, I'm almost positive.
No. Okay, I did.
No, I've never killed anyone. Why would you even ask that question?
This is the guy.
Hold on, I mean, I do have some questions about my qualifications. I've never been to seminary.
Oh, you'll do fine.
I really don't have a whole lot of experience.
Do you love God?
Yeah,
Do you want to help people?
sure.
Do you have a harem?
No, I don't have a harem.
All right, we're good then. Thank you. Because...
Let me think about this for...
oh, got her.
Oh, wait a second. Look who has them. Still got the tablets.
So it's important to remember who God uses, right? Any other things from you guys about the why?
Well, I would just tell you, this is one of my favorite videos, and one of the reasons we use this is because we've elevated in our minds the people that God uses and who he can use. And this really exemplified to us how God uses everybody, really seriously flawed people. And sometimes as leaders, we're actually the ones that are getting in the way of letting people be involved and serve in our churches.
And by doing that, we're reinforcing a lot what people themselves feel, that they can't contribute, or they're not, for whatever reason, they don't think they are good enough to do it.
Yeah, the guy at the end, I haven't been to seminary, right? Where'd he get that idea from?
So another Mentimeter question. Here's what we'd like you to take a look at. From your perspective, what's the biggest challenge you face in getting more members involved in ministry? And again, you could probably pick all of these, right? But I'm asking you to pick one. People are too busy. I don't know what gifts the members have. I don't want to ask people because nobody ever says yes. I'm not clear about what I'm asking them to do, or I have trouble letting go. Please go ahead and answer.
And be honest.
Look at that.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So it looks like the challenge that is most deeply felt is that it feels like people are just too busy. Now, in your experience at Trinity Crete, how did that play out?
Our schedule is a challenge. We have a school system in Crete, so preschool through high school, a 2-campus school system. You get throw in sports practices and all that kind of stuff. Schedule is a problem. But that's not stopped people. You know, if they know their gifts, if they know what they're doing makes a difference, they will do it.
Make time for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, when they're passionate about different areas too, that's also part of the draw that brings them in. People make time for things that they value, and so helping them get connected to right fits are part of why we have people involved as highly as we do.
Yeah. Well, I think you're going to hear in this next piece of our conversation, you're going to hear things that address all 5 of those challenges. And we're really excited to have this conversation. So just to begin with, what is member ministry? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, so when I was originally asked to serve as the coordinator of member ministry at Trinity, it was actually a volunteer coordinator position that we were looking for. And I think we found that we moved away from that volunteer coordinator title really, really quickly. Yeah, Frank says. We really felt like when we understand the body of Christ and that we each have a part to play, the idea of volunteering didn't necessarily fit. So we ended up calling it personal member ministry, and that became our title for the system that we created to engage people in meaningful ministry. So we believe that everybody has a personal ministry or personal calling, and that changes throughout our lifetime. But that the idea of having member ministry was to create that system. And what was that going to look like for our congregation?
Nice. So can you give us all, at the big picture level, what that member ministry was like before this journey went on and what it looked like after?
Yeah, so do you want to jump in and start?
Talk about the before.
Okay, so the before, right? We had the typical 20% of the people doing 80% of the work, but we were putting warm bodies in seats just to fill spots. We weren't interested in getting the right person. We were just happy with a yes. You know, if somebody said yes. And that made it very awkward for a lot of people because when they would serve, they were frustrated because they weren't good or passionate about it. And it frustrated the staff as well because people weren't committed.
I don't know about, I'm assuming at a lot of your congregations, there's a lot of people that are willing to do whatever needs to be done, even if they aren't necessarily comfortable doing it. And we found that. People are very willing because, yeah, it needs to be done, but not a good fit. We had someone that's in charge of our outreach that was just, didn't have a passion for outreach, but needed to be done, so he did it.
Yep. And so we found multiple people. When I started, I did board interviews with just our board members, and many of them said, I really should be a trustee instead of an elder, because I really like working with my hands, but nobody bothered to ask me that, right? So that's an example of one of those fits. So in the interim process then, as we started to make the transition, it took us 18 months to build the member ministry system at our church because we recognized we needed to do a lot of work. But in that transition phase, we learned a lot of things about what we were doing that wasn't working well, and our approach wasn't working well. Afterwards, we really got the right person serving in the right place at the right time and for the right reason. And when we stepped into that kind of behavior, now people are excited, they're energized, they can't wait to serve with one another. They're looking forward to when they're going to serve next.
I'll throw in a little thing there too. And so we still had open spots sometimes, but we came with the idea that it's actually better to have an open spot than to have the wrong person in there. So it's really the right person serving at the right time with the right gifts that God's given them.
Absolutely. And so we also learned a couple other things. With member ministry, it wasn't, when we started, it was about filling slots. And it was about somebody come take something off of my plate. Versus the idea of releasing people to live out the calling that God had placed on their life, to help them get connected to how they could best share Jesus with other people and what that was going to look like. So that was part of the shift as well. I'll go back to our statistic. So we had gone through a lot of vision planning at our church, and when we had done that, we were asked the question, how many people are currently serving in your church? And we said, how are we going to figure that out? We didn't have a process to do that. When I left, so I served from 2008 to 2015, we had 399 people actively engaged in ministry, and we were worshiping 400. I left in 2015, and we created a sustainable member ministry system. So in 2016, they had 425 people actually serving in ministry. So it wasn't about the system was created around a certain person or personality. It was just created for the benefit of God's kingdom.
You heard that right, okay? 399 people at our church serving when we're worshiping just over 400, okay? That's not 20% doing 80% of the work. That it really is amazing. Now, that's in some ministry organized at our church. That's not out in the community. That's not volunteering at school. That's not how people live out their lives, their faith at home. That's just at our church.
So you did a lot of work to create that system, and it actually has 8 components. Would you be willing to share those with us?
I sure would. So the 8 key components of member ministry that we built it around, the very first one was the biblical foundations. What does God have to say about how we're supposed to do church together? You know, and as we looked at those, and we really did a lot of Bible study, we dug into it with our central leadership. Started with our staff, our board members, our ministry leaders, and then out to the congregation. As we started to look at those biblical foundations, we realized the way we were doing church wasn't right. We were relying on a few paid professionals to do the work of the church, rather than all of us being confident that we were capable of being the church. So we had a very consumer mindset going on. But when we looked at what God had to say about it, it began to change things. The second thing was, what was our culture, and are people aware that they even need to be serving, right? So as we started talking about what is our culture, we happen to be Wells people. No booing, please. Anyhow, but in our Wells system, right, the theory of called workers is a term that we use freely. So if they're called workers, what are the rest of us, right? So we had to start to change that understanding that we're all called to ministry. We're all called to serve. So some of those cultural things we needed to start breaking down. The idea that how I do ministry is not the way Frank does ministry, you know? And yet, often when our pastors would train or equip us, we would get trained to do it their way, you know? And that wouldn't be the way that another individual would do it. So if I'm doing outreach, the way Frank's gonna do it is gonna look completely different than the way I do it. And so that was part of that change,
That
right?
was okay.
And that was, amen. Can I have a high five? You know, that was okay. And so helping people understand that, to be able to be comfortable with how we do ministry doesn't look the same. That was huge. So we changed the culture, we changed awareness. And again, where do you start? With the leaders, because changing culture, as you all know, is not an easy process. The third piece is assimilation or integration, and I really like the words belonging and connecting. How do we help people be part of the church, and how do you connect them? And member ministry is a natural way, helping them understand how they fit together with your congregation and your people. The fourth piece, and I'm going to give you a slide in just a second that'll tell you an opportunity to go much deeper on a lot of these. But the fourth piece is discovery. So church is very much about helping people know God, know Jesus, right? But I think if we can learn how to invest in people a little bit and learn how to help people be self-aware, more understanding of what their gifts and talents are, what their strengths are, then they are more confident in stepping into those roles. So our discovery process, we help them understand what their spiritual gifts are. It's called Shape to Serve, by the way. What their spiritual gifts are, what they have a heart or passion for, what their abilities and talents are, which those are those time and talent sheets, right, that everybody has. They have people fill them out, and then they stick them in a drawer, and then never do anything with it. And now what have I just told those people? You're not good enough, or we don't need you, or whatever. So we do negative stuff sometimes with those. We do personality. So we also start teaching people about not only how to be self-aware, but how to be others aware too, right? So that it's okay that the way Frank and I do ministry isn't the same, the way Sue and I do ministry isn't the same, and different is good. That's the way God designed us. So when we understand that, that changes things implicitly. So SHAPE, experience. This was a biggie, right, Frank, for our little church. Understanding that how God has, the things that God has taken us through and comforted us with, how we can use those things for the benefit of his kingdom. So what life experiences has God given you that you can use for the benefit of someone else? So an example, Pastor, have you ever lost a child?
Nope.
Nope.
Well,
Yes, miscarriage,
yes.
right?
Yep.
But you've, a live birth child,
Right.
no. So when a mom loses a child, who is most effective in helping that mom through the process?
Someone who's gone through it herself.
Yeah, another person who's experienced that. So using those life experience examples to help people get connected to ways that they can share Jesus and share their Jesus stories is huge. Another example, from life experience. Can you think of one off the top of your head, Frank? I'll put you on the spot.
Oh boy, life experience. Well, I can think of the negative life experiences where it always kept people away from serving because they were always told they weren't good enough. They weren't, they couldn't do anything good. And so understanding that also.
Yeah, so sometimes, we heard earlier in the day about that woman that was a prostitute. Does she think that God can use her? Well, absolutely God can use her. So how do you help people understand that? And in those stories, that God uses everybody, right? That God created us for a purpose in his plan. And by his grace, he allows us to be part of his work. So the last one is D. So SHAPE has been around for a long time. It was originally started by another congregation, another church. And we took that and we added the D to it. So the doing part. What are you doing to live out your faith? How are you getting filled up and filling your cup spiritually so that you have something to give, right? What kind of time availability do you have? Well, a lot of you guys thought that was the number one thing, right, that keeps people from serving. Once it's a priority for them, they will step into that freely and readily. And so having those conversations with them so that they understood these things personally, then they made it a priority.
I'm jumping ahead a little bit to the next point. You're going to have matching placement, but of the 399 we had that one year, that wasn't 399 people doing something every day or every one thing a week. Maybe they were involved with Vacation Bible School for that week, or they were involved with choir, which meant every single week during the school year, or it meant any number of variety of things because it met people's schedules and their life.
Absolutely. And that was one of the big things that we learned. In churches, we typically say, yes, we'd like you to come on this board, and the term is 3 years. And people are like, are you kidding me? I can tell you what I'm doing this week, and beyond that, I'm not interested in a 3-year commitment. So how do you make serving experiences more manageable for people and meeting people where they're at? So that's a big part of that. In regard to matching and placement, do you even know what opportunities exist within your church that you can plug people into? Or better yet, do you know what opportunities exist in your community that you can plug people into? We found out that we didn't have those answers, and we had to go back and look at our org structure and start to identify where we had possibilities for people to get connected. And then in conjunction with that, we ended up writing ministry position descriptions. And those descriptions became living documents that we would look at on an annual basis and update them so that when somebody left the Sunday school program, we hadn't built it around just one person. We'd actually built it around 4 or more. But then when one person left, you actually have the document and the tool. So the system that we created really required documentation and intentionality. The last two pieces, one is equipping. How are we training our people? What kind of resources are we doing? I giggle. What's our favorite thing to do?
Field trips.
Let's go on a field trip, Frank. Let's go learn from other people.
Yeah.
You know, you guys all have great things going on in your churches. And so how are you learning from one another? How are you communicating with that? And so that was one of the main pieces that we picked up on. Pastor Sutton's sitting here in the front row. I'm going to pick on you. So we heard you had a good stewardship program going on. We get on the phone with them and we say, hey, would you mind talking to our treasurer, who happened to be my husband at the time. But, you know, so that we could start to share some of that information when we're trying to equip people, right? And so we started also with our board retreats and bringing in speakers to help and encourage them in their servant leadership. How to set good goals, just different types of skill sets that we were working to develop. And then finally, recognition and reflection. You guys, people like to be thanked, right? Yes? Can I hear here's a round of applause for you guys for the amazing job that you all do, right? A thank you goes a long way sometimes to keeping things going. And a lot of times we don't want to take the time because we're afraid we're going to miss thanking someone. So we thank no one, right? So how do we recognize both the people who serve, the ministries that we have, and then how do we allow people to give us feedback? How do we allow people to reflect on what their serving experience was like? And when we allow that to happen, that evaluation process helps us to grow and improve our area of ministry. So, Sue, I talked a really long time.
It's okay. We're good.
Yeah, so there's a slide here that you'll see at the end that talks about a free hour-and-a-half webinar that you can participate in. No commitments, no anything. Just let me talk to you a little bit longer about these pieces so that you have a better understanding. And those are coming up at the end of October. Okay, Sue, what else you got?
Awesome. Just awesome. Well, I think it would be really great for you guys to kind of share, because this is a whole lot of doing that you've done, which is awesome. I suspect that there had to be some mindset shifts that happened in order to even approach this kind of system. So what were the mindset changes that had to happen in order for you to be able to involve more members in ministry?
Can we start with the staff?
Sure. So I think for me, it was a long learning process. But the biggest aha moment for me was understanding as the pastor or as staff, my focus was on those who were doing. Take Sunday school. You know, Sunday school, the focus should be on the kids, right? Yeah. But that's not my focus. I realized my focus needs to be filling up and encouraging and equipping those who are running Sunday school. And so Ephesians chapter 4, you know, God gave some to be apostles, pastors, teachers, all that. Why? To equip God's people for works of service. So that was a mind shift, that I'm not the doer, I'm not the planner, I'm the one behind those who are doing, equipping and encouraging and cheering them on.
Absolutely. And so as you stepped into that equipping concept, how did we do that? How did we change that mindset in our pastors and in our staff? It wasn't an easy process. It required us to think. So we started out by reading a book called Me to We by Alan Nelson. And it was just that general concept of how do we shift from me doing all the ministry to we doing ministry together. And the story is just about one pastor in a church who is just barely hanging on, and another pastor that's on the other side of church, and his church is thriving, and they're growing, and this guy's over here floundering, and they meet over coffee, and they talk about this change in mindset of equipping other people to do ministry.
Any other mindset shifts?
Oh, yeah. So let's talk about our leaders. Can I just say that became a real challenge at our church? is recognizing that sometimes your leaders are part of the problem. Anybody got just one or two? Okay, right? Thank you. I'm glad you're listening. Thank you, thank you. You know, I'll start with someone, and don't repeat this. I called her the kitchen Nazi, okay? Anybody got one of those? Right? Yeah, so there was only one way to do everything in her kitchen, and if anybody didn't do it her way, it was a problem. So we had to start by just talking about leaders being good leaders and what that meant and what it didn't mean. It didn't mean that you were all powerful and in charge. We needed to teach servant leadership to our leaders. And so what did that look like? And that change and mindset was big. And she and I are still friends. Yeah. Isn't that the best part, right? But we had to make a shift. Other places, mindsets, just in the people in the pews, right? So, and this is that culture shift. How are we doing this? We had to change people from that consumer mindset to the idea that we're providers of ministry, all of us together, that we're the church. So that consumer mindset, I go back to vocabulary with a lot of the culture shift. You know, talk about membership. Where do we see membership, right? I have a membership at the gym. I get to decide whether I go or not go, right? I have a member at Costco or Sam's Club. There's perks for me, right? Some people still have members at country clubs and the swimming pool, and you're going to provide all these ministries for me, and it's going to be all about me, and we create this mindset that it's all about me. And I see a big smile over there. I'm resonating, right? That we have to change that mindset to help people understand that that's not how God designed church. We're supposed to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And so how do we help them understand and change that cultures?
Vocabulary that you already talked about. We didn't use the word volunteer anymore.
Yep, completely. I became the volunteer word Nazi. No more. We're not doing that anymore. We cannot do that anymore.
Did you use a different word?
Just serving opportunities.
Serving opportunities.
Right?
Yeah.
And that really also, I think, took some of the pressure off of people too, because it was opportunities. And when people understood what their good fits were versus what their not so good fits were, they were ready to step in.
So, Frank, from a pastor's perspective, what were the challenges and the joys in this process for you?
Challenges, kind of already talked about, is that mind shift. And it took me a while, it took me a long time. I remember I kept asking, okay, I can wrap my brain around it, but I can cognitively understand this, but what does it look like? What does it look like to equip and really focus on those who are doing and not be the doer? And I kept asking that, and you already mentioned the book, Me to We, really helped me personally to wrap my brain around that. Challenges also is when you don't have everyone on board, and you really have people that want to do and really don't care about the rest. The rest are just to help you as opposed to the other way around. Joys are, man, when you see people that have spiritual gifts God has given them, and they're using them, and they have a passion for it, they just go all in. You know, forget volunteer hours, they just go all in, and it is a joy for them, and to see a congregation of people that they know that they have this gift and they're using it, and it's to God's glory, they're doing God's work. That's a joy for me. I mean, that's absolute joy.
Hey, Sue, I'm going to throw another question at Frank.
Yeah.
So we're just coming off of a 1.5-year vacancy. Talk to people a little bit about how you survived that, going from 3 full-time staff members to you, 1 alone, for 18 months.
Grace of God. Amen. No, yep, that's bottom line. But so we worship about 400. We have 1,100 on members on book. Yeah, from 3 full-time staff to me for a 1.5 years. So immediately going into that vacancy, double vacancy, I knew obviously that I can't do everything. So we've been talking about it, but never really did much with it until we had to. And so we got teams of people visiting our homebound members instead of me, which is an awesome blessing. We ended up hiring part-time staff from the congregation as opposed to doing full-time. And there's a whole long list. And we asked members to, hey, can you step up and do some things and give them the opportunity and the know-how and train to do it, and off they go.
Talk about Mary Beth.
Yeah. Oh, Mary Beth. So she's one of our part-time hired members. We hired her for our outreach. She worked for, 30-some years at a local bank. And so she knew everyone in the community, and everyone knew her. And what a benefit for someone in charge of outreach to know and have those contacts. And she is on fire. She just loves talking to people, always has, but now she's doing it for her Lord, very specifically, and for a church that she grew up in. And it's energized our outreach ministry like never before. It's really cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, so you've probably added 6 part-time staff people?
Yeah, something like that.
From the congregation, lay members, who are kind of helping because we're struggling with a pastoral shortage. And it's just a new way of being able to do ministry. And people that kind of get a running start because they already know people in the community. So that's been a blessing.
So, Lori, you were asked to lead this charge and figure this system out. And can you share with us what the pastors at the time and other leaders did that really supported the process?
Absolutely. So first of all, they acknowledged that what we were doing wasn't working. They recognized that there was a problem, and they began to address it. So at Trinity, it actually got incorporated into our vision planning, and we had a whole page just specifically for member ministry. And we knew that we had to do something different, so they not only built it into the vision, but then they budgeted for it and budgeted to hire for the position. So think about member ministry as HR for the church, right? So if you've been in church life your whole time, you may not get that. My daughter's an HR coordinator. She just manages the people side of things. If we expect our pastors to be able to do the relationship building and the investing of time with all of the people in our churches, it's not realistic. So my job was HR for the church, and being able to release those human resources into the church and into God's kingdom were tremendous blessings. So they budgeted for it, they hired for it, and then all the board members, staff got on board, board members got on board. So they were all prepared to lead by example. So they were all in, they were fully committed. And then they learned how to embrace this new way of doing things, that the work shouldn't be done by the boards, that the work should be done by other people, so that we moved from the idea of leaders as doers to the idea of leaders as equippers.
So flip the charge there, Frank. What did you notice that Lori did that helped pastors and leaders get on board?
She was our constant voice. You know.
Wait a minute, I don't know if I like that.
Yeah, no, but really, you were the constant voice of keeping us in front of us and reminding us when we talk one way or think the old way, wait a minute, we have to keep on thinking about this, thinking about that person, or thinking about how we're doing this. And I'll just go back to what Lori said. For whatever size church you are, that the bottom line is you spend money on what you think is important. And for us then to spend money on this position and this ministry meant this is important to us.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm going to throw out one of the last lines that we have on the last slide, but one of the questions when he said you're the constant voice, one of the things that I would ask them all the time is, why are you doing what others can do and not doing what only you can do? right? Why are you doing what others can do and not doing what only you can do? So who can you partner up with? Who can you develop? Who can you invest in? Who can take this next step with you? And that really helped to change the culture as well.
I think that's a great question, actually for every Christian. Like, figure out what it is that God has made you to do and do that.
Amen.
Do that. So I am excited because we were worried we wouldn't have much time for this, but now we get to hear some people stories. So I think it's always great to hear how this kind of ministry played out for actual human beings. And so would you guys share with us some of those stories?
Yeah, so, you know, what did member ministry look like? We talked about that discovery process, right? And some of the things that were outgrowths of that. People would go through the process, they would sit down with a guide, and they talk about all the things that they learned about themselves, and then we would help them get connected to ministry. So one guy that comes to mind right off the bat was a guy named Jay, and he was a drug enforcement agent. I mean, he was always packing. You knew Jay and what he did, and I was amazed when he said, "Lori, I have a heart for some of the people that I arrest. I really, really do. And they're not bad people. They make bad choices." And Jay wanted to get involved with prison ministry. And we didn't have anything like that going on in our church. It was an interesting process to go through to bring somebody in. But Jay started with the guys and got a group of half a dozen men or so together, and then also the women. And we go down to, where do we go to?
Kankakee.
Kankakee. Yeah, we go down to Kankakee into the local prison and do Bible studies there. And the men and the women do it. And now the really cool thing about that one is Jay's gone and the ministry still continues. So that's one story. You got another one.
Well, we got tons. The other is when people find out not only what their spiritual gifts are, but realize, you know, what their passions are, and somehow you can combine those and actually use them in the kingdom. The one I always think of is, we call her Shoop. She's one of our teachers in our school system. Single lady, always will be, but she loves dogs, and she always, she trains the dogs and gets them certified and all that. And she went through our discovery process and realized, wait a minute, I have this passion for my dogs, and I can use that? And so we helped her to figure this out, and we came up with, or she came up with what we call Pause with a Purpose. So she got some other people that have dogs that are trained and takes them to nursing homes and things like that. And she trained her dog, I just love this. She trained her dog to go up to a chair, put its paws on it and its head down so it looks like it's praying. And in a nursing home, she does that little trick with her dog. And what a great avenue then to, well, who do we pray for? Who can we pray to? And it leads right into the gospel. And what a cool thing. And she just, has a passion for it.
I got another one.
Yeah,
I got another one. I gotta go, because I'm excited about it. Another one was called Adventures for the Almighty. So we have a young woman, Colleen, in our church, and she's pushing 30 now, but when she had this idea, she was single, and she was passionate about sharing Jesus, but all we really had going on in our church was our LWMS group, which sends money, but she wanted to actually go and do the hands-on, make a personal impact, see how she could make a difference. So we got a group of people together called Adventures for the Almighty, and they went and did some relief work. They went and did some canvassing. Frank and I actually were part of a team of 12 people that went down to Texas. We have a son of our congregation who was a new pastor starting a church down there, and a dozen of us went down there to help him get things off the ground. Got another one?
Do the puppets, or you want to do the puppets?
Yeah, no, you do it.
So we have one of our amazing women of the congregation. We got, every church has great people, right? I don't even know the whole story. You probably know more than I do, but got the idea of doing puppet ministry. Not every church has puppets. And it just so happened, as God works things out, another woman of the congregation got very sick and died, and she had just amassed a collection of professional-made puppets and donated them. So you're talking a lot of money there, and go with it.
Okay, so
'cause
Audrey,
it's amazing,
this
Audrey.
85-year-old lady, finds out there's all these puppets, and she was a wonderful Sunday school teacher for years and years and years and years. She's like, hey, I think we could use these puppets to share Jesus. So she starts this puppet ministry. Now it gets even better, you guys. So this puppet ministry not only does Vacation Bible School and Sunday school at our church, but they go out into the community and do puppet shows in the community and tell people about Jesus in the community. But not only that, it gets better. So there's this guy, Joe, who joins our church, who didn't really find a great place to fit in. He was about 80 years old. He had been an actor, and he was like, hey, this puppet ministry thing sounded kind of interesting. I think I want to go that route. Joe gets involved with puppet ministry. He was the guy with the popcorn. You know, he'd walk around and give popcorn to all the kids at the puppet shows. Anyhow, Joe gets sick, and these ladies that are in this puppet ministry minister to him, help him get to the doctor. They build a relationship. Joe ends up leaving $20,000 to our puppet ministry at our church. And so these ladies have been able to get the sound system. They've actually taken the show on the road. Somebody here had the puppets at their church recently, and so it's been a tremendous blessing. And I have one more, if I can, Sue. So Sue said one story, and we were like, no, we got somewhere the one story. So on my way up here, driving, I get a text, and of course you're not supposed to, check your text, but I push the button on the car, and she says, kids just picked up 995 pounds of pasta. Whoopee! And I'm like, oh my goodness. So Martha is this woman that lives in our community in Crete, and she works at a warehouse far, far away. But she had found out, oh gosh, probably 8 years ago or so. So we do what we call Faith in Action Day. So remember I talked about those short-term serving experiences? So just for a morning, we do a bunch of work, and we get everybody involved. The little kids, the big kids, everybody. And so our high school kids do a community-wide food drive on that day, drop off flyers in the community on one Saturday. The next Saturday, they just go and pick up stuff off of people's porches. Martha had gotten one of these flyers on her door, and she works at a warehouse, and a lot of times they'll get broken boxes or whatever. So Martha started saving the pasta for us, and our students would go down and pick up the pasta and then go to our local pantry and fill the shelves for the seniors that are working there. And the story gets better. So Martha has built a relationship with us in our church because she knows about this, and while we're working on her, she watches Pastor preach on Facebook every week. We haven't gotten her through the walls. Well, she's actually been inside a couple of times, but we haven't gotten her to officially commit, but she's right there all the time trying to make a difference. So.
Do you know how much pasta that is?
It's a whole pickup truck full of pasta.
So I think we have the time for you to share, either one of you or both of you, the role of short-term volunteer opportunities to serve.
Yeah, so Faith in Action Day was something that we started back in 2010. We do it one Saturday in October. It's a half-day service opportunity. We provide probably 13 or so different ways that people can serve. And they can donate things.
And all ages.
Right, all ages, all ages. They can donate things, they can be used things, new things, they can donate money, and then, of course, their time. The very first year we did this, the goal was to have our people be internally strong and externally focused. So we actually moved everyone outside of the walls of the church on that day. Nobody was serving inside the church. And so we were looking for, how do we get our people more out in the community, more community focused, and serving other people so that they could tell their Jesus stories, to people who already didn't know Jesus.
Can you say that phrase again? Internally strong.
Internally strong, externally focused.
Awesome. So, this I think is really important. I know when I look at your 8 components, it looks pretty overwhelming. What key concepts and ideas do you think hold, sort of no matter what size your place is?
Yeah, so thanks for that question. You know, a lot of times people think, okay, you're big, you can do this, right? But how do you scale it down? The reality is you need to have some type of a system. You have to be intentional about it. And really what it comes down to is investing in people and building relationships. So how are you getting to know your people? Who is getting to know your people? That takes time. And our society is moving further and further away from having strong interpersonal relationships. So how do you teach that to people? I would tell you that if you are a pastor and you are responsible for this, you have to schedule time to make it happen. Because if you don't schedule the time, it won't happen. Because we know what your lives look like. Can I just say I absolutely love pastors, and this is one of the reasons why I do what I do, is because I recognize that there's a never-ending to-do list, right? But there's lots of people that if we could have those meaningful conversations that could partner up with you and take on different areas of responsibility. So that's a lot of what Frank and I would do. He'd say, in fact, when the vacancy happened, right, we sat down and we had a conversation. You want to share that conversation?
I don't remember those.
Oh, for
a year and a half
sake.
ago.
Okay. So, Lori, what am I going to do? Conversation. You know, where can I get rid of some stuff, right? And so when we had that conversation, it was like, okay, so let's talk about what's on your plate, and let's talk about what things we can get off your plate that you are not necessarily gifted to do. Which, did I just say a pastor wasn't gifted in all the areas?
Yes, that is a true statement.
Did I say that?
Yes, you did.
Yeah, right?
I fully admit that.
Right. So, and lay leaders, you need to know that about your pastors. I mean, I've been in situations where pastors said, if I told my congregation I wasn't good at outreach, I would fear for my job, you know? Not everybody is people-oriented. Some of us are more task-driven, right? Helping people partner up so that we can be more effective in God's kingdom is what it's all about.
Yeah, I was struck by a conversation that we had in preparing for this where you said, really in a small place, it could look like someone who probably has the gift of hospitality and wants to get to know who people really are and becomes intentional about having those conversations with people. And there's a set of questions on the handout that we gave you that could start that. So if you're interested in getting to know people in your congregation or helping somebody else do that, those questions are awesome and they're a great place to start, I think.
Yeah, and so, you know, so that brings up a good point in that a lot of times this isn't a one and done conversation, right? Building relationships with people takes time. And so sometimes in building those relationships, you're not going to necessarily find out how this person can serve, but how this person needs to be served.
Right. Yeah, that's actually part of the discovery process that we learned is you take someone through a class, they learn their spiritual gifts and all that, and at the end you realize they're in no spiritual, emotional place to be involved. They need to be served. And that's just as good to know also.
Absolutely. And so another ministry that came out of all this was Stephen Ministry, where we had members from our congregation trained so that they can pick up where the pastor leaves off and walk alongside people when they're going through hard stuff. So that was really important. But I just want to go back and touch on, you know, what things can you hold on to?
Yeah.
Right? So those conversations, that relationship building is important. And these 4 letters, you guys, I just did a discussion with pastors not too long ago on a book called Hero Makers. And we only took part of the book and went down that direction. But the idea is that stop trying to be the hero yourself and start to learn how to make heroes of others. And one of the examples that they gave in there was the ability to have an I see and you conversation with people. And so when you can get to that point of being able to have a relationship with somebody and say, Sue, I see in you a woman who has an amazing heart for kids and a love for God's people. I think, Sue, I would really like to connect you with my friend so-and-so because she would love to talk to you about some of the children's ministry that we have available in our church. But when you can have those I see and you conversations and then say, you, Sue, would be amazing. And I believe this would be a great connection for you. Now I've also told Sue that I believe in her abilities, that she could step into this.
Thank you.
I see that in you. All right, girl. And then once you get past that, then teach leaders how to do that, right? Can you imagine if you could teach other leaders to go and build relationships and take the time to have those conversations? So if you think about Jesus, right, and his time with the disciples, he spent 75% of his time with those 12 guys, right? And he was investing in them over that course of time and was teaching them and handing ministry off to them, right? And so we need to think about how are we doing that? How are we investing in other people so that they can be able to have those things? So I would challenge you to think about having 12 I see in you conversations with people over the course of 2020. Think about what that would look like. You would need to schedule time, meet with different people, one person a month. Hopefully by the end of the month, you can figure out how to have an I see in you conversation. And that's a means for you to start to think about how you can multiply ministry. And then the last takeaway I have for you is just provide short-term serving opportunities in your church. Maybe what you're currently doing isn't attracting anybody, but let new people come for a first time.
Love it. So, Frank, what would you want pastors in the room to know?
Good question. So I'll say this. Of course, as pastors, well, and in church, right, everything we do is based on God's word. So what does the Bible tell us? God created us. That's a show of God's love. That's grace in action. God sent Jesus, his son, to die for us. That is God's grace. That's his love in action. The Holy Spirit created faith in our hearts through the means of grace. That's God's love in action. And the Holy Spirit gives us his spiritual gifts as he determines, as he knows is best for us to have. He's given us the gifts. He's motivated us to use those gifts through the gospel. So my advice to pastors is get out of the way. Don't be the reason that someone doesn't use their gifts. It's a bad position to be when you're in the way of the Holy Spirit doing his work. So get out of the way, let people use their gifts. The phrase where it said, why are you doing something that someone else can do and not doing what only you can do? So if someone has gifts, let them use it, because it's not going to be your gifts, and it's going to be way better if they do it because you don't have those gifts that they do. That'd be my thing.
Frank, can you talk a little bit about trust? I mean, some of the pastors in the room have been burned, right?
Yeah.
They hand things off,
Yep.
and it doesn't get done. Can you just speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I've been burned any number of times. But if you recognize how the Holy Spirit has given people the gifts that the Holy Spirit has given them, that God has given them, and if you give them the tools they need to use those gifts in whatever way it is, let them go. Do it. Trust them. And give them the guidance and whatever the help they need to do it. but get out of their way and let them do it.
Yeah, so just that idea, the leadership baton concept,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
When you're going to release somebody into an area of ministry, you don't want to just throw them into the deep end, right? You want to kind of walk alongside of them for a period of time, hanging onto that baton together, but then you want to release them. So that's that training and equipping idea. But, you know, some of us struggle with letting go and the micromanagement side of things at times. And so that can sometimes be a stumbling block for people too. I was sitting next to another pastor earlier today, and he said, I'm on a college campus right now, and I realize that I'm not the smartest person around. Like, they're all like really smart. Those are the people in the pews around you as well. You know, those people and the gifts and the talents that they have, they just need to be released so that they can step into those areas and understand that you're going to encourage them and support them in what they do.
So, Lori, I would like to get at your heart here a little bit. So, you obviously have lots and lots to say about member ministry, but I would like to know, you know, what do you most want people to know about it?
My heart, huh?
Yeah.
So if you guys can't tell, I'm pretty passionate about this area, right? And Heidi shared earlier the idea of some people are an advocate. I'm here being an advocate for the people in the pews, okay? My background was a lay person. I was on staff, but I'm the lay person who understands that that other lay person over there is working 60 hours a week. And it's not that they don't want to make a kingdom impact. It might be they don't really want to help you set up the chairs because they're not really passionate about setting up the chairs. So we got to go find these other lay people that are willing to say, yeah, serving general's my gig. I want to be behind the scenes. Let me do that. But that guy that's over there, he's the CFO, you know, of a company, and he's not going to come in and set up chairs. So getting the right people in the right place is really what it's all about. And don't undervalue those people because they do want to make a kingdom impact. So how do you release them to do that?
Thank you. So what a great time to be hearing the journey that Frank and Lori have been on. We're going to process that just real briefly together. So the first is with a Mentimeter question. I would like, this one's a word cloud. So if you would just type a word in that describes what happened at Lori and Pastor Italiano's church.
Whoopee. Engagement, empowering, discipleship. Is it pretty cool?
It is pretty cool.
I like this.
I can't keep up.
Look at the big word.
Yeah.
Amen. Healthy functioning. Ooh.
Intentional.
Awesome.
Involvement, yep.
Those are beautiful words, and
Cool.
they're a sign of what we know that Jesus is up to in the world. And he's up to these things in your place as well. And so we're hoping that this is going to be an encouragement to you. I'd like to ask you to take just a moment to share one with just one other person. What did you hear in Lori and Pastor Italiano's church that excites you or challenges you? Can you just share briefly with one other person that? What did you hear that either excites you or challenges you? Or maybe there's some of both. Here's the opportunity that Lori was talking about to join her for a free hour-and-a-half webinar. And that her website is also in your handout so that you can get to that. There's one more slide, right?
Yep, and so this one, you will get an attachment that'll be sent out by the Siebert Foundation, a follow-up. And so this is the free hour-and-a-half webinar. I also do, and the next slide is the 15-hour online course, which digs deep into this about how to go about building a member ministry system. My primary work, the way I like to do it is an 18-month consulting plan that walks alongside of people to help build the system so that you don't have to figure it out by yourself. When we figured it out, yeah, we figured it out. But boy, oh boy, it's nice to walk alongside of someone else. And I have another coordinator in the room who I'm actually working with right now when we're about 15 months into the process. And it's exciting to see another congregation be ready to take that step and make things happen. And Pastor Sutton, I know it's also happening at your church, so that's exciting to know as well.
Thank you, panel. We appreciate all the information you provided and your input. First, I'd like to ask if you could either tell us or post the title of the book and the author that you mentioned earlier.
Sure. It's called Me to We by Alan Nelson.
Me to We by
Amazon.
Amazon. You guys heard that? Excellent. Okay, some of these questions are in categories, and this first category is discovery. Okay? So, it can be that anybody on the panel can respond, or all of you. This first one is, how do you help people discover their gifts? Do you use a tool? How do you mine this information?
Great question, right? So we actually started out doing a weekend workshop, and we started with our most seasoned people, and we kind of worked our way out. We basically, our discovery process served about 20 to 25 people at a time, so that we were constantly bringing in more people, taking small groups through. We do use tools to help people understand that, understanding that those are just assessments. And Blanche, I'm not very good at multiple questions. What did I miss?
Well, you talked about a tool, and then about how do you mine the information? How do you gather it all together?
Right. So when we talked about that guide session, so we have what we call a profile and a handbook that we use with people. And in the profile, that's all the information that we grab about them that we want. And then we put that into our church database software. Nice. And that way we can access that. We also, in that process, ask people where they're currently serving. So now we've got a database of that as well, so we can see before Frank goes and asks Sue if she'd run our Sunday school program, he can go, wow, Sue, you're doing 7 things. I got a great offer for you. So I'd really like you to think about looking at those and reconsider.
Doesn't answer your question, but that brings up an important point.
What's that?
Sometimes the best fit means they stop doing what they're doing.
Amen to that.
And so actually we find what their gifts and their talents and everything, oh, this is a perfect fit, but they're doing these 3 other things. We've had a conversation that we really think this is great for you, but in order for you to do that, I'd actually recommend you drop this and this.
Or you get to make the decision about what you are going to drop.
But we've done that.
But we recognize balance, and that's what we want people to have, is a balanced life and a joyful life so that they can serve effectively.
Excellent.
And to answer kind of the same question, so when we started this journey, our goal was to get everyone through it as members. And we got the vast majority of really active people. Now, it's just really, right now, just new members coming through. And that's actually the last step of our membership process, is they go through a 3-hour version of the shaped class.
Nice. And I have to talk about, and our confirmation students go through it, and our high school students go through it as well. So they, as they're getting ready to go off to college, know what their strengths are.
All right.
Yeah.
Great. So then how do you use the software to help? I think you kind of talked about that a little bit already, so we'll move on.
Well, and off of that, so the confirmands, 8th grade, go through it, and then the idea is you find a fit for them in high school years so that they have a start that lifetime of service.
Wow.
Right then there. We can't do tons of our ministries without our high school kids.
And just for that question too, Blanche, the idea that how we use the software, when he has a spot that needs to be filled, we run the report. Who has the gift of outreach, when we're looking for our board of outreach, or who has these particular gifts. Now we've got that database. So again, remember, it's not just about filling slots, right? But it's releasing people in different areas as well. And we didn't talk about that whole new ministry startup process. But when we found things that were also connected where we could put people together, that also sometimes came out of that database as well. When we found out Jay wanted to start prison ministry. Well, who else said that they had an interest in serving those that are incarcerated? Which state it is? So we were back on Shepherd's staff many, many moons ago, and we've just...
We just switched over to Church Community Builder. I don't know if that's yep. We were really excited about it because of the service and the spiritual gifts, and they just took it away.
Yeah, no, they are not going the direction we hoped.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, here's another category. Yes, something about your mic is not either talking. All right. Okay. This category is delegation. What about a pastor or lay leader what about them who wants to delegate? What do you do while still controlling? You can't trust who do you want to micromanage and how the work is done. So how do you manage all of that? You know, you got people that they want to be involved, they want to delegate, and they still want to be controlling at the same time. They need to delegate. How do you deal with the micromanaging in that kind of way?
Conversation. Really, one of the big things that Lori helped us do is put everything on paper. Okay. So every position at church, here's the vision for the ministry, how it fits into the larger church vision. Here's the qualifications for this position, the responsibilities, the time commitment, the relationships and everything, who if this reports to somebody or whatever, what budget there is for it. All of that's very clear. And so if someone's not doing what they really need to be doing, let's look at what the position really is supposed to be doing.
So it's pretty much laid out, you're saying, and that people can...
It's laid out at the beginning, and then it's there for evaluation and follow-up and keeping it that way.
Excellent.
Well, on that note too, Blanche, one of the things that we recognized was that we gave our pastors the title of spiritual advisors for our boards versus the ones that were doing all the reporting and that aspect of things, that they were not expected to be the doers, but the advisors.
Yes, got it.
I would just add to that I think there is also, if you're a person who likes to be in control of everything, then this process is going to involve some loss.
Yeah.
And grief.
Well.
Yep. And I actually, when I train, do the 15-hour online thing, there's a sheet there that just says, are you a micromanager? And helps you go down the list and say, oh my, that is me, And some of us struggle with it more than others.
Sure.
But clear communication in the process as you're handing things off and building trust is what it's all about.
Here's another. Do you employ a process or procedure documents so that leaders can delegate and are the expectations clear? So you kind of answer that. How do staff speak truth to power? In other words, get out of the way.
In love.
That's right. Speak the truth in love.
Speak it in love, right? And, we were blessed.
Absolutely.
Just because we had a really good working relationship. And the other senior pastor that worked with me originally, I said, I kind of feel like I got to tiptoe around, like on eggshells. And he took eggshells and crushed them up and put them in the envelope for me and says, Lori, just say it like it is, girl. And so giving permission in that regard was huge for me to be able to say, you guys,
I'll throw in another angle too, and it goes to the personalities. That's part of our discovery process, learning and understanding not only your own personality, and it's really amazing. If you've never done a personality test, what that really, that's so me. But then understanding how other people are and, understanding those differences. We've had conflict, in our worship ministry. Imagine that, worship and
conflict,
people, have opinions. And it wasn't going good. And we brought Lori back in and just literally went through the personalities. And, that's why you said that. That's why you did that. It's from that perspective. And just understanding that builds the trust and also kind of dissipates some of that conflict.
Okay. Another category. This one's culture. I really like the emphasis on member ministry versus volunteers. How did you retool the vocabulary to change the culture, or the culture to change the vocabulary?
Yeah, so this was a process, right? Changing culture never happens overnight. And so language was a big part of that. We even eliminated the word, I tried to convince them to eliminate the word delegate, that we are going to partner in this area of ministry so that you can get that idea, him as the leader, that he's handing this off, that there's a relationship in this partner versus delegating just could mean, let me set this here, this is your job, go do it.
Put it in your lap and go.
Yeah. So that partner thing also gives a little bit of accountability to that second person who's getting that area of responsibility, you know, that they can't just run amok.
And how we did that was, I mean, every time using the same language, purposeful language, whether sermon series, Bible classes, communication to the congregation, it took a long time, but just consistent with it.
One last question, because we're almost out of time. How do we need to change the way we think about stewardship? How do we need to change the way we think about stewardship?
Who came up with this question? Just kidding. Well, I would just say, let it be fun. You know, would be one thing that I would say about stewardship. You can serve together and enjoy what you're doing, right? And so I think sometimes we just need to release a little bit more of that energy to make it enjoyable. I would also say just stewardship as a whole is a heavy word, right? Just teach people how to live out their faith. Let them live it out and know that they're going to do it different than you, and that's okay. It's better than okay. It's the way God designed it to be.
Wow, wow.
I'll add to that, it's not a single person thing. Body of Christ, we need each other because you and you and you have gifts that I don't, and so I need what you have and you need what I have. We're in this together, so yeah, maybe that's the other thing.
We're better together.
We're better together.
We are.
So join me in thanking the panel for their time, for the Q&A and everything else.